Thank you very much. So I'm going to read the Indigenous Acknowledgement Statement. We would like to begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards of the land. The municipality is located within the boundary of Treaty 18, region of 1818, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and the Wyandot peoples. Do I need to review teleconference procedures? I think we're familiar with that. Now, they haven't changed with us, some of us being in the room, I don't think. I'd like to move on to approval of the agenda. Is there any changes that anyone wishes to make to the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, may I have a mover and seconder that the agenda of March 17, 2022 be approved as circulated? Oh, I saw Andrea. And
second that.
Okay, Morris Pepper. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none, thank you. There are some reports to be received as information. I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder that the board receive as information the action plan Q1, Q2, 2022, CEO service update for March, the BMPL 2022 annual proposed budget, and the strategic planning working group mandate update for March. Looking for a mover and seconder, please. See Dorothy moving it. See Jesse seconding. Any questions? All in favor? Okay, thank you. I saw all hands, so it's carried. Previous minutes. This is a motion to approve the minutes as circulated from the February 17, 2022 meeting. May I just get the motion on the table? Mover and seconder, Andrea, thank you. Seconder, Dorothy. Any questions, comments, changes? Seeing none. Second, I have to adjust my screen so I can see everybody. Then, all in favor? Great, thank you, that's carried. Business arising from the minutes. I just had one question myself. I know under the F5, there's a reference to a gallery door counter, and I was wondering if it's been installed.
I can respond to that. The gallery door counter has arrived. It came this week. It has not been installed yet. It was tested, but we have a change in our gallery. So the piano is going to be that we have is going to be leaving us, and we have another piano which is being donated in, baby grand. So as soon as the baby grand is on site, we'll be doing the door counter just in case it is obstructing the counter's view. So it'll be happening shortly. But it is on site.
Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, can I get a mover and seconder that the board receive discussions on the business arising, since it was a bit of discussion? Mover, please. Andrea, thank you. Seconder? Morris, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Communications with the board. We have no one scheduled for deputation. We have no one providing public input on the agenda, and we have no correspondence. So we don't need to do a motion regarding correspondence at all. So then we're on to our F1, which is the action plan updates. Are there any questions that anyone wishes to ask about these? Seeing none from anybody else, I think C 4.1 was completed. It wasn't marked completed on this copy, which is developing the Q1 and Q2 action plan. And there is, coming up in May is the annual report. Is there anything we need to talk about that at this point, or is that simply going to be coming in April for a draft, or are we doing it in video? So I guess I have a few questions that maybe you can answer, Sabrina.
So we have not actually made a final decision on what this is going to be. That's a board decision. So we have done an annual report that was a written report, usually about 4 pages long. Last year we did differently, and we actually did it as the video. We had 370 views of the year in review. That was the video last year. So I guess the question to the board is, what would you like to have happen this year? It is scheduled to be something that's brought back in draft for April.
Any thoughts? I was interested to hear which had 370 views. That seems like quite a lot more than I would expect people reading a print report. So it seems to have been a successful approach last year. Any comments, any thoughts on whether we should do it that way or change it?
Got a question. Is there a big cost differential doing it between the print version and the other version? Roughly, I'll be talking $10 or $5,000, you know.
So there is no cost for us doing the video. That is in-house with our own team. If we're doing the print, there is a cost for that, and it's a question of, are we going to print it? Are we going to do it electronic release, which we did 2 years ago, so that there were only about 20 or 30 that were printed that we had on site for people that might want copies that went to council departments and individual councilors. So that, again, was an in-house print, so no real cost on that. And then 3 years back, so the 2020 was video, the 2019 was printed in-house, the 2018 we actually mailed to households, and that would be about a $3,000 cost. So obviously a much bigger price point on that one. We moved away from that in 2018 because we didn't think the uptake was worth the expense. If we were going to do a paper version, a print copy version, then it would probably be going according to our e-newsletter, again, release, which is several hundred, about 800 copies that go out. It also gets picked up occasionally, not that there's a contract with Blue Mountain Review, but often they will pick up pieces that are in our newsletters and reprint. So that's always a possibility. And then the video, of course, was something that we were able to send out links also electronically to all of our people that subscribe and promote in-house as well. So either way that we do it this year would be a relatively cost-free option.
Any other questions or comments? Andrea?
Thank you. My question is, with the staff time that's involved then, so no extra costs, but what would be your assessment about the staff time involved in preparing either one comparatively?
Good question. The video definitely takes more staff time. I think that the uptake on the video was well received though. So I think that was, we probably got more views, more interest based on that than simply the print item.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Can I get a show of hands on sort of a sense of video versus print? So supporting the video. Okay. Jesse, did you want to make any? Okay, I didn't see your hand there, so I was going to give you a chance to comment, but it sounds like video seems to be a reasonable direction to go in for us again. So would there still be a quote draft coming to the April meeting, and is it changeable at that point?
So I think the best option, we are currently working on our annual survey for the ministry, which is how we do all of our 2021 statistics. We'll also be using that in a part of the strat plan. So we're working on those to be done by the end of the month. I will then write up a script and I can share that with the chair so that the chair has an opportunity to review the script and make sure that you're happy with that. Once that is done, we can do a very rough cut of what we're looking for to bring to the board if they wanted to see it. Otherwise, if the board is comfortable with the chair approving the content, I can bring a final to the board. There's still opportunities to make some minor edits, but the further we are in the mastering and the final product, the more backtracking we have to do. So it's just a case, does the board want to turn that to the chair or have a final approval?
How did we do that last year?
Last time we were not as productive. Last time we did look at the script, and then when it came to the board, we thought it was in the final. There were some edits that were made, which meant we did have to go back and do a lot of the remastering twice. So that means that sound matching up with video, you have to do that sort of minutia twice. So if it's a case where the board wants to review, we'll make sure it's in a rough version so that you're getting the general idea of what you want, but it might not be color corrected or video corrected. And if it's the chair who's going to be the one who's doing that, and we're bringing the final to the board, then the board would be seeing just the final version. So that's just a choice of how in-depth the board members wish to be.
Can I get some direction from the board on how you'd like to proceed? Okay, let me ask it differently. Are you happy if I just take a look at the script and sort of on behalf of the board, basically approve the content? Or would you like to see something more come back to the board?
I'd like to see something more come back to the board.
Dorothy?
I think given last year's experience where you had to remaster a couple of times, it might be prudent for the board to see the draft.
Last year was a learning curve. So yes, we learned what we don't want to do. It was our first major video in that way. So we learned, not that there was any mistakes made in that, it was just a first time experience. So yes, we will definitely learn from our mistakes.
Okay, so I've heard two people ask for a draft to come to the board. Does that work for, well, I guess the other two? Andrea?
Unmute, Andrea.
plugging it back in, see if it was just a.
It worked the first time I was speaking. Okay, that. Can people hear me now?
Yes,
Okay, good. I am actually comfortable with it going through the chair, Madam Chair. But I also did not have the same experience as the board members from the previous year because this is the first time that I'm coming around.
Morris, any thoughts?
Well, I do tend to agree with Jesse that, I mean, it is a report from this board, and the whole board should put their final seal of approval on it. I'm not taking anything away from the chair in the sense that the chair should be able to do it, but I do think the whole board should put their seal of approval on it.
Okay, so let's expect to have a draft come to the April board meeting. Great, thank you. Is there any other discussion on the action plan? And we already received that, so I think we can move on. Okay, so now I know where we're at. So the next item on the agenda is the strategic plan working group update for March. And so this, of course, is the report on the survey responses. And I see Mary, I see you now. So I just thought I'd maybe do a bit of an introduction on this. The overall positivity rate is 85.7%, which is pretty good. We had a low of 70.7, so it's still a strong majority, and that was for values. And we had a high of 95.7 in support of the goal that refers to social cohesion. We had 6 that were coming in the 90s, 5 in the 80s, and 4 in the 70s. So I thought maybe an approach to discussion might be to look at the ones that were lower. If that works for people?
Mhm.
Okay, great. So that would take you to page 4 of the report, where we have values, 70.7 positivity rate. And it was a really interesting discussion, I thought, when I looked at some of the comments. And there seemed to be a sort of a shift towards, maybe combining some or dropping some off. But the general comment seemed to be that if people didn't select it, it was nonetheless important value and just not as relevant to the library. So I don't know if people feel we should take a look at these again, or consider any changes, or do we need maybe to have more of an explanation out in the community of how these items are used in our day-to-day business or governance? I'd like to open the floor to discussion. Jesse.
thank you. I was really impressed with the large response, and in particular with the high emphasis on the use of the gallery. It's obviously a very popular locale and a popular use, and we have to, I think, spend some time to perhaps consider whether it can be the use of the gallery can be expanded beyond what it is now, although I think people seem to be very happy with the way it's used now. That's my comment for the moment.
So that you moved on a little bit to the develop multi-use spaces and provide outreach services, which was a 77.5% positivity rate. And that was, I think, the one that was colored a bit by some misunderstanding that we were planning to do something to the gallery. Maybe Sabrina, if you can comment on that, or
certainly. So there, when we originally did not have the examples, which would be more of an action item in a given year, we focused only on the goal by trying to bring in examples of what the goals could be objectified with various objectives and action plans. Definitely there was some reading into areas. One of the things that came up was an idea that rumors spread that the gallery was actually going to be decommissioned and it could be turned into office space. So that's not the intention. We are always trying to see how we better use our spaces, which is why we have the idea of continually reconfiguring our spaces to do the best with them. One example would be that we've moved our children's section around to have more ability to have story time in the space, or moving our study carols from one area of the room to another area of the space. Our gallery, we're always trying to make it as functional as it is for a gallery, while also doing programming, doing hybrid programming. Our ACC Presents may have 100 people in there. Jazz is going to be back in the library next week on the 25th. So we're always using our gallery for spaces, but I think that was one of those examples that did get a bit lost in the rumor mill. So we did try to work with people to make sure that that was not something that was a fear situation that was propagated in the community, but it did bring out in many of the responses just how important the Ellie Shore's current setup is. And certainly expansion is one thing, but not to decommission or devalue an area. And certainly we don't intend to drop the G in glam. So that was kind of where that part came in. Other pieces, I know back to the value statement that you had, the values are a difficult one, in part because SurveyMonkey does not give you the ability to have an image. So we couldn't have our word map, which actually is in the report that you're seeing, that is what we use as our letterhead. It's here in our boardroom, and it is demonstrating that our values are wide and well thought out in that way. But our values are not about the community. It's about how we serve the community. So it's based on the knowledge industry of museum services, library services, GLAM services. And there's some of them that when we look at the lower numbers, that maybe are confusing for a person to say, what does it mean to have courage or clarity or directness? And I'm sure there's nobody who feels that the library staff should not be asked a question, reference request, for example, and not be given clarity in the response. And yet it has 50.49%. So 50% think it should be one of our values. So I think that with the values, it may be helpful for us to have examples of what this means to the knowledge industry, so to the staff, how we provide the services that we do. That could be something that we post in our strategic plan progress report. It may be something in our governance page that we have an explanation of each of these on a page about our vision. For those, of our values, for those that are interested. I don't think that anybody is going to say we shouldn't have excellence or trust or stewardship as a area, and yet we know that they were lower in there. One mistake that I will say that we made with the survey is it would have been very helpful had we said, yes, support it as it is, and then given the numbers, because there were so many that I think some people might have actually just got tired of clicking on the item. So select all, or talk about which ones you think should or should not be in there. So this one, I would argue that from a knowledge industry, staff and governance aspect, these still are the keystones of the industry that we follow.
Does anyone want to comment on that, or are we okay leaving the values as they are?
Laurie? These values have been around for quite a few years, and they've been very successful. I mean, in terms of every time I look at this agenda or whatever I see on paper and on the computer, it's very interesting. But I don't see any reason to change them right now. And in fact, I'm not overly concerned, not that I know that much about statistics and approval levels and so forth, but whether it's 70% or 80% or even less, I'd say these values have been good for us, and we should just carry on and work with it. We design the long range plan, bearing in mind that, yes, this year we've got 70% approval or whatever you call it, and just go ahead anyway.
Any other comments? Just personally, I think like the idea of maybe a description of how some of these things are applied when you work, that would be useful to have on the website. So you mentioned when we talked about this a bit earlier, and you mentioned, for example, why one might need to be courageous working in a library. That was an interesting perspective. Do you want to mention that again to the board?
Certainly. So courage and being courageous, it doesn't speak to people when you just think of it as a value, but think about the types of sectors of groups that we work with. So a marginalized person coming in that is needing somebody to stand up and be their advocate. Often we have mental health situations that, you know, it's very easy to turn a blind eye. There is no duty to report in our industry. And the non-courageous thing would just be to let the person go about their day and just sort of shake it off. It's much more difficult to actually involve yourself when somebody is in crisis. And we know that, you know, you hear the stories about people that just sort of keep going about their day and don't think about those. And our staff doing those types of things put in extra hours. They stay late waiting for the parent who didn't show up for the child. They call Child Protective Services when they know that it would be easier to let that child go in a snowstorm, knowing that tomorrow there's probably going to be a very irate parent calling you saying, why didn't you let my child go home in the dark? Or why did you close? Or whatever the situation may be. So our staff are regularly having to live these values on a daily basis when we're providing services. There's others that are very similar that we don't always think about. Supporting democracy is, for example, 59.71% positivity. So we round that up to 60%. We looked at anything under a 70 as being questionable, and we wanted to be, you know, questioning how we use those. But we know that supporting democracy is what we're all doing today as we're raising flags for Ukraine, as we're giving money for the Red Cross. In our regular lives of library service, of museum service, of knowledge industry, we're working to make sure that from a democratic end, that we are teaching citizenry to the next generation, that we're providing the resources and the information for parents to be able to do that with their children, that we're supporting the school and doing citizenship building. So all of these may be values that you say, yes, it's important, but I don't see what it is to the library, but it is part of what we do in our library, museum, and gallery on a daily basis.
Thank you. Can I jump ahead to the other one? The next one, I should say, about the under 80% positivity, and that is number 12, increase BNPL financial opportunities, which had a 74% positivity rate. And I thought some of these comments were very interesting. And, I've highlighted in my copy here, there's one wallet in the community, and the idea that we shouldn't try to do additional fundraising in the community or take potential donations from other community charities. Now, I know when we crafted this, and the action that is on for this year is to acquire charitable status independent of the town, so that we can apply for grants that otherwise we wouldn't be able to apply for. But in answering the survey, people looked at it from a broader perspective. And the emphasis seemed to be we should be funded through the tax base and not as a charity. So I thought that was an interesting perspective from the community that I hadn't really expected to see. But the positivity rate is still at 74, and I think still good support for us to look at other financial opportunities, and particularly for us, it's grants. Anybody want to comment on that?
Lori, if I may?
Yes.
This is one section, I think, where the rate is skewed because of that misunderstanding of why we went to charitable status. Do you know what I mean by bringing out a wrong thought of what we were looking for? It skewed the whole thing, is what I'm driving at. I can't back that up with numbers, but do you understand what I'm saying? I think that's part of it.
Yes, I know. I know what you're saying, and I think when we get down to writing the actual action plan, it will become clear the direction in which we're trying to go with this. With this goal.
Of course.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is an interesting response about the charitable status and saying, well, why should we be looking for outside funds? Because we as a town pursue outside funds as well. We don't rely on only taxpayer base when there are grants that we qualify for because we have projects that we are doing elsewhere in the town that contribute to the goal of that particular fund or that particular grant. We pursue it. So I can completely understand the drive behind the library to do the same thing, that when they're providing a cultural program or anything that contributes to sustainability from any of the three pillars of sustainability to the community, that they could very well be, one of the examples that particular grant or fund is trying to promote across the country or province or wherever the money is coming from. So I think it's actually in tandem with the taxpayers' money that we strive to go up and above and provide that extra that we can, and to be able to see where the money is matched for that. I do hear elsewhere as well the one wallet concept. So when it comes to actual fundraising, and it certainly was very much the driving rationale behind striking the Grants and Donations Committee and coming up with a system in which we could collect money and then disperse it back out to the community. So I can appreciate when people say, well, I'd like to support the community, but I thought I was already doing it here. How come now there's another event that I should be going to or something like that? So I hear that concern, and certainly we all have to be able to budget what our family can handle to support what's going on in the community.
Sabrina, I see your hand up.
There's a few pieces that I'd just like to address from the comments, and I agree with all of them, even though they appear to contravene the goal. I think they're right on mark. So as Andrea said, I strongly believe that we should be aware of what our community is putting forward. We heard in the budget deliberations at council the question of should we raise taxes or raise fees? In the end, this is where that one wallet concept is. It doesn't make a difference if it's a tax, if it's a fee, it's still coming out of somebody's pocket. So we have to be aware of that. So as we're looking at grants and opportunities, we're not talking about a major giving campaign in that way, that we're going to go door to door and ask people for funds. We are looking for areas that we don't qualify for because we're not a charity, and that the town wouldn't qualify for under a municipal charitable receipt. So these are very different ones. For example, if we want to apply to, the GM Foundation for an after-school program that we're already doing, but could get some additional resources on, it makes sense that we're doing that. It stretches our dollar. It shows that we are fiscally responsible. What's important to note is, I think, the concept that they don't want us to undercut other charities. And that is why partnership is a key part of this strategic plan. So if there's areas that we should be partnering with people and the things that we're doing, we're not looking to undercut funding. We're looking for people to be partnering together to provide better resources. So I do believe that the goal of our financial expansion of how we're looking at things is important. I think that the charitable end is a piece of that, but then as you mentioned, Madam Chair, all of these comments are what we look at as we start writing our action plan, and as we're interpreting our action plans, we don't make sure that we're undermining our efforts or undermining other groups' efforts. So I think that we can do this well, expand our base, and really do the best for our community from outside sources.
Anyone else have any other comments they'd like to make on that one? Seeing none, the last one that was under an 80% were the underpinning themes. We had identified, it's at 73.1%. We had identified 4 themes, but it was pointed out there was some overlap. In one case, one was already a goal and one was already a value. So that is the reason 2 of them were removed, because they're already represented in other aspects of the proposed plan. And that leaves us with 2 underpinning themes, truth and reconciliation, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. Anyone wish to comment on that? Or have any other questions? Seeing none. Oops. I thought we could move to a motion, unless we have anything else someone wants to discuss about the strat plan. And the motions would be, there's 2 of them, to approve the mission, vision, and values. And the second one would be to approve the 3 strategic pillars, 11 goals, and the underpinning themes, the revised version of the underpinning themes. So before I ask for mover and seconder, I give a good chance for anybody else to make any comments. I would have to accept that silence is agreement.
If I could just make one quick comment.
Sorry.
I just wanted to congratulate Mary Dodge, our acting manager of community engagement. This really was her brainchild, using the Harwood Institute and doing work that she had done through the Apple program, the Advancing Public Library Leadership, brought ideas and concepts back and helped the board design a very extensive plan on how we were going to do community consultation. that is in a era that most people didn't even bother doing strategic plans, let alone community consultation for strategic plans. So I think it was extremely successful. It was done well. It was done safely. We were everywhere. I don't think we'll hear from anybody that they didn't know that we were doing a strategic plan. So the work that was done really was exemplary in this end. And I think that the result is we have a strong plan that we can move forward with, a nimble plan that we have the ability to adjust, not knowing what the next few years are going to look like, working within it through our action items, but still maintaining the goals and the pillars that we've set out, regardless of what the world throws at us in the next few years.
Yes, and thank you, Mary. It's been a pleasure working with you on this. So I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the mission, vision, and value statements. Mover, please.
So moved.
Morris. Seconder, please. Andrea. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. And may I have a second motion that the board approve the 3 strategic pillars, 11 goals, and 2 underpinning themes of the strategic plan 2022-2026. Mover, please. Dorothy. Thank you. Seconder, please. Jesse. Thank you. All in favor? Great. Thank you very much. That one is carried as well. So just as you saw in the report, the next stages of this is to produce the actual document, the strategic plan document, as well as the executive summary of the plan, and that we presented to the board at the April board meeting. Then the working group will place a request for deputation to council to present the strat plan to them, and we'll also be offering a presentation to the public. And that might be face-to-face or virtual, depending on where things are at that point. That's it for that topic. Thank you. Let's see here. The next item is a verbal report on the BNPL logo update. Sabrina.
So the Blue Mountains Public Library has a logo which is dated at this point. We know it's beloved, but sometimes we do need to freshen things up. Our logo predates the town logo, and if you look the two of them side by side, they're quite similar. It often gets confusing when we're doing branding. I mean, if you want to go with the concept of the bay, the land, there's only so many it's going to be. We have an iconic waterfront. And as a result, we both had very similar pieces. In addition to the logo itself being problematic in that way, from a vector end, it was done quite a number of years ago, and it doesn't meet the standards now for the technology to be able to do the proper printing that we need. And it would cost us just as much money, if not more, to redo the current logo as it is to do a rebranding. In 2018, we had a rebranding on our plans, and we pushed that back to try to focus more on the strat plan. Then 2019, we were going to start looking at it. 2020, it was going to happen, and we did change things in 2020. So now we're at the point where we would like to move forward with this. We have narrowed down to a concept, and I say a concept because there is not going to be one logo. There are going to be multiple logos in multiple formats, all with the same image. So it's important that we have the ability to make a circle, to make a square in the corner, to make a banner on a web page, to make a header on a letter. So that is why there's multiple versions of what appears to really be the same thing. So a local company has provided this for us, and they have conceptually said that there is in that image, both the B and the M for the blue mountains. There is the mountains, there is the water, there is the bay. If you look closely, you'll see all of those pieces. But this is the concept that as a team, we have started to move towards. Lettering will still be adjusted slightly, and we'll make sure that we have all of the functions and features to be able to have, like I said, about 5 different ways of showing the same image. But I would like to bring to the board to see if the board has any feedback or if the board has any interest in participating in any of this final work. Sorry, I lost my mute button.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, it really is kind of an operational item in any case, but I thought it was important for the board to know that there's some work going on in this area. Dawned on me, but I'm not sure how people heard me with this thing on. Okay. So
If I may,
We are hopeful that this will be done by the actual strat plan release, so that the new logo will be on the strat plan. We're very close to being at a point where we think we can get into some final revisions and some final work. So if it is a case of the board approving the final strat plan, the big document in April, and then being able to go to print shortly thereafter, that is our goal, that we're going to be ready within the next month.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Got to use this hand.
It works very well in council because it actually numbers who's next, who speaks first, second, third, last. So that's right. That's right. So I just want to be fair to those who aren't in the room. That's all. Anyway, I don't want to take it for long. I just wanted to pass on my compliments to the new logo design. I think it's great. I was raised by a mother who is a color theory expert, and you know, 2 parents that met in art college. So I grew up along a lot of logo talk and design talk, and I think you've nailed it. I think that is going to be very complimentary. I like the kind of abstract L that was in there, as well as the complementary use of the orange with the blue, and I think it inspires people to come to the library. So thank you.
Thank you. So the next report is me, and I will confess, I spent more time skiing this month than I did on library things, but I did spend some time on the strat plan report that you saw today, and also on the budget, which is coming up a little bit later. And I just want to talk a bit more about the May meeting, because that's the next sort of major planning item that we'll be working on, Sabrina and I, and that we'll be doing some prep. Sabrina doesn't know this yet. We'll be doing some prep material in advance to help prepare people for the discussions at that May day-long planning session. So there'll be some information around key supporters, advocacy plan, draft action plan, a legacy document, and board recruitment. So I've actually spent some time thinking about what kind of documentation we might need, so people have a chance to look at it in advance and come to the May meeting more prepared. So more on that, Sabrina, later.
I have something for Vibrant Spaces.
Okay. So the next item is Vibrant Spaces, and Sabrina says she has something on that.
So as of the time that the report went out, the package, I didn't have anything for Vibrant Spaces, but in the last windstorm, we lost a significant portion of our roof at the depot. Yesterday, they were in taking a look at it, and today they are ripping the roof off completely and redoing the roof as an emergency order through council. It was something that has been on the the building conditions report that was done by council in 2018 that we identified. We had won successfully a grant that included doing the roof of the depot and a few other pieces in the depot. And timing, it was pushed from last year to this year. So now we're just moving forward in a rapid fire emergency situation. Luckily, council does have a company that was able to very quickly come in and at least we'll start to button it up so that there's no water coming in tonight. And I would expect within the week we'll have a new roof on the museum. It is a historic building. We are doing our best to meet both the heritage designation as well as the vitality of the building. So what that particular roof was and should be is a cedar shake roof. And we know that a cedar shake roof will last quite a long time, but the cost is quite extensive and well beyond our ability. The cheaper of the options for a roof would be to go to a metal roof, which moves us completely away from the heritage designation that we have with a generic barn style roof. So we are going for an asphalt shingle, but it is one of the designed asphalt shingles that look like a cedar shake. And importantly, it's a product that is designed for high wind shear, which is really the issue that we have right there on the edge of the bay. We are constantly sandblasted, which is why we have to paint that building as often as we do. The wind is significant, and whenever we have our tornado watches and warnings, we know it tends to come right down that place. So that is something that has been really the balance between having a heritage roof and having one that appears to fall into suit with the time period, and then making sure that we're going to be maintaining the building for years to come. The rest of that project will be coming, but obviously we've completely switched gears from the larger proposal that was going out to now just getting the roof done, and then we'll backtrack and look at the rest of buttoning up of the building, which includes windows, doors. Much of the area of siding has to be done, and then painting. And then we'll go in to do the final work on the HVAC, which will be a commercial end that can work towards museum standards. It still will not get us to museum standards because a museum standard HVAC would be about the size of the entire grant. So it'll be something that we can add on to, though, as opposed to a residential unit, which is what we have right now. So we're working towards it, but just in case you drive by and see some major work happening at the depot, wasn't planned, but thank you to our council departments for getting there very quickly when the crisis did happen.
Anyone have any questions they want to ask? Jesse?
Is there any insurance coverage for that loss?
No, at this point, there is no actual loss other than the roof, which was slated to be repaired in 2017. We don't have any major damage. There are a few pieces of the underboard sheathing that are wet. Maybe they have to replace some of those, I'm not sure. But at this point, it's not on our budget. It's part of the town's repairs. It was slated to be done a few years back and just keeps getting pushed. So the funds were available to do it. I'm assuming that they may have some additional costs given that it was emergency work as opposed to actually having it happen on a scheduled basis. But the town does have some vendors of record, so I'm assuming that that's something that they've built in. I'm not actually privy to the finance end of it at this point, though. It's actually moving as we go. It happened today, and they've been on it all day.
Jesse?
Well, but that doesn't answer my question. No doubt that there was a policy of insurance on the building. And my question is whether or not it included coverage for windstorm damage. And if that's something that the town would be informed about, then can we find out about that?
Yes, there is insurance for that. The town is informed on every windstorm what the condition of the roof is. They inspect it regularly. I highly doubt that there would be anything from a coverage because it was well past its life and they were aware of that. But the town is the one doing the maintenance and the repairs on it, and they work very closely with the risk management and insurance department there. So they are all interchangeable through the finance and making sure that all aspects are covered at this point. But again, not something that I am privy to that information because it's not falling in our budget. So they're keeping me informed of operationally what's happening with it, but I won't actually have all of the details on the finance since it is a town budget.
So it's actually, because it's a town-owned building, it's town insurance that covers it. Or if it doesn't apply, it's a town question, not really for us. Yes. Okay.
Okay, well, my parting comment is that whether or not the roof is beyond its normal age is not the question. The question, perhaps, Madam Chair, through you to Andrea, the question for the town's executive is whether or not the insurance company which insures that building is on the hook to pay the cost of replacing the roof. That's not our business, I suppose.
Thank you. Through you, the chair, Dr. Saunders has more information on this than I do because of the urgency in which it's happened. So I can take your question and query to the staff at the town, and at our next board meeting, I can provide an update for, I guess, from business from arising from minutes.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you, Andrea. Any other questions or comments on that topic? In which case, can we move on to the CEO service update for March, please?
All right, so we made the changes that were requested in the previous month, again, on the chart of statistics that we'll be providing. So we're now looking at the current month and the previous month of the same year, and then this month last year, that would have those year-to-date totals. So if you're looking at February of 22, you compare them to the February of 21. You can also see how we've grown from last month, and then year-to-date will continue forward as well. You may come across some where we just don't have stats because we've changed what statistics we're having, but hopefully we'll be able to build those out from year to year for you again. Certainly if there's any questions, I can answer those. I think one of the biggest changes that you see is the actual active users from current, which is 4,500 from February, and last year at this time, which was 5,600. It has not been a case that we've actually lost that many members. We have a trend that is happening in our library as well as happening in many libraries across the province and across the country, is that families are starting to drop individual cards and families are going for family cards. So instead of mom having a card, the teenager having a card, the 10-year-old having a card, the 6-year-old having a card, and the newborn having a card, we now have one person who has the card, and any of those members can come in and take books out on it. It just makes it easier for parents especially to be able to maintain having one account, one email's worth of information, and seeing what's due to come back at a certain time. So our usership is not declining, but our actual card membership is. This is something we've brought up to the ministry because it still is one of the largest forms of determining success of a public library is how many card holders do you have based on your population. So even if we were looking at, the now 9,000 population, we know that half of our people have cards, but that does tell you, since so many of them are family cards, that we are well saturated in our community. A typical success rate is actually 1/3 of your community. So even if we're looking at the lower number, we're above that. If we're looking at the higher number in the 15,000 mark, and you're identifying that we have family cards, not individual cards, we are doing quite well from that statistic. And if you remember from 2019, we are the #1 card holder and the #1 program offering in our class of library. So in our 15,000 population libraries. Outside of that, there is some information about some new things that we're trying here. So we are going to be having a juried show, and certainly if anybody from the board or anybody who listens to this board meeting is a artist, we certainly encourage you to apply or to let anybody know that there is an opportunity for a juried show to apply into. There's a youth component, so we're really hoping that our schools and our youth 20 and under will participate. And there is no minimum age on that. We have jurors who are going to be reviewing all of the work, providing feedback. It is done just like a professional juried show. So it's an exciting thing that we'll be doing this year for our first time. Hopefully we'll be able to do it again coming up in the future as well. It may not be an annual because of the workload, but certainly every few years would be fantastic. COVID restrictions are here, and of course they're all dated already. On Monday, as we know, all of our mask bylaws end. Our staff are going to continue to wear masks, and they will continue to wear masks at least until the end of April. We're going to make decisions at the end of April where we are. We cannot require community members to wear masks in our building, but we are highly encouraging people to do that when they enter the building. When you're in a seated position, like we are here in the boardroom, we're all within the several meters apart, and there's safety in doing those pieces. But you would notice that, if I was to stand up and go to the other side of the room because I cross paths, we have on our masks there. Our staff are still going to continue to wear masks, and any staff member who chooses to wear a mask after the library, Blue Mountains Public Library says it's no longer required by staff, can still do that. We will still provide the PPE. So we will probably have staff continuing to wear masks for some time at this point. I do know from an accessibility end, we've had community members who have complained because it's hard to hear. Many people need to read lips when they're hearing, and we do apologize, but it is a health and safety matter that at this point will be the stance of the organization. And moving forward, when we drop that, if we feel it is safe to do so in the future, then it'll be a by choice of the staff person, and that is their own personal wellness that they are maintaining. So it will be their choice if they choose. So we apologize if there's inconveniences, but we do hope that everybody will work with us as we try to keep both our community and our staff healthy and safe. Outside of that, if there were any questions, I certainly have the ability to answer questions. Long report, lots of information, same as usual.
Sabrina, could I ask, just going back to the active users, is it possible to split those up between individual and family cards?
What we actually do is we ask, if you say that you're using it for a family card, and ask how many people are using the card. So we can say how many patrons that represents, which is the way we're reporting it to the ministry at this point, because we don't want to all of a sudden go from being #1 in our class to being at the bottom because we're supporting people who don't want to carry 5 pieces of plastic with them.
Yeah. Yep, I think that would be really helpful. I mean, even if we only assume 2 per family card, it really changes the stats and the perception of the stats. Thank you.
And is the 4,500, is that which is that? Is that sort of counting the 4 people in the family, or is that counting one? So that's just counting one.
That's cards.
I think I saw other hands up. But maybe not. No other questions or comments?
She made my comment.
It's already handled. Okay, good. In which case, I'd like to have a motion that the board receive the strategic plan discussions as information.
So moved.
Morris, moving. Seconder, please. Andrea, thank you very much. All in favor? Great, thank you. So all hands, so that is carried. We're into other business, and the first item of other business is the annual proposed budget for 2022. So I'll ask Sabrina to comment.
So the budget is attached. We did mention last month that we were well late in this process, but we wanted to make sure that council had finalized the salary study and the actual wages and all of those aspects that were going to inform what we could do. Council was gracious enough not only to move forward with the 6% tax levy, but to cover the gap between what we knew the wages would be in this year. So we could have passed this budget back in September, but the concern that I had was about being financially sound for years future. And we wanted to make sure that before we started moving forward with any changes in the way we were doing things and doing our 3-year budget, that we actually would have a balanced budget in 2023 and 2024. So that's why this is coming to you in March. Once we now are through all of the salary study with the town and we have the 2022 budget passed by council, we know exactly what our 23 budget is, and our projections for 24, 25 and on are at a very low conservative rate of growth. And as we know, we are the second fastest growing municipality in Canada, so that conservative rate will probably well be blown out of the water in our years to come if we continue to grow at the rates that we have in the past few years. So I feel very confident in saying that the budget that is being presented for 22 also has a very good projection for 24 and on, and we know 100% for 23, given that it's based on this year's budget. I will walk through just the basic way that we've set this up. It is a bit different than using the council's forms that we used in the past. We have a summary chart here that is letting you know what the contribution levels of council are based on the tax levy. So we know that the 2021 is what set our rate of contribution for this year. And then there's also the additional funds that council put in. Based on that, we know that the 2022 tax rate or tax levy was $18,515,300. That tells us what we're going to be receiving next year in 2023. And then we can project out, we had as a 0.5% growth, which is very conservative. Like I said, being one of these fastest growing municipalities, we do assume this tax rate may be tax levy may be higher than that. I apologize. Tax rate is not at all what we're talking about. Tax levy is what we're talking about. The tax rate may very well go down in the community based on our assessment rate. And that is why we based the agreement with council on tax levy, so that we're not ever in a case where more assessment actually hurts us. So based on that, we have a 2023 and 2024 proposed budget. That is presented here, as well as the approval that you're giving for 22. We know that our human resources expenses have gone up from last year based on the salary study. Every position in our organization, including our youth, went up. Some by quite a significant portion. This is a good thing because we knew that our staff had been undervalued both externally and through an internal equity. The additional piece on that is that pay equity is now being achieved. So the difference between full-time and part-time people is being paid in accordance, since we have a significant amount of part-time staff in our organization, whereas there are not in the overall grid. So those pieces are now being paid out. Our operational has a much higher rate this year because there were pieces that we were rolling over that needed to be achieved in this year. And then our capital, again, had some pieces that we had pushed during the pandemic that we'll be seeing happening this year that were part of the rollover funds that were remaining from our 2021 budget with council. Outside of that, we know that we have revenues, again, a larger amount of revenues this year based on some of the grants that will roll over between 21 and 22. And then moving forward, we are anticipating that those revenues would probably go down unless the Canadian government continues to put such a high rate of internship funding to our community. Now, this does not include any of the aspect that we're talking about through the strategic plan for fundraising through grants in other areas. If we receive a grant to do a project, obviously that increases the revenue, and then on the same end, we'll increase the expense there, but we're still looking at that balanced budget. So I do not ever include revenues or expenses that are projected because it's speculative and we don't want to approve to move forward with something until we know that we've actually had it. And then you see that there's the 160,000 that is the council one-time wage top up, and that was just for this year to buy us the time to get through the salary study and make things work moving forward. We are running a very tight ship, which is hundreds of dollars left, which is usually where we are at the end of our year. And that is based on this new salary study, making sure that we can actually maintain all of our employment and that there's no negative impact as a result of for service or for staff as a result of having these increases. Outside of that, I am willing to take any questions that you have on the budget sheets. It's probably better than simply walking through lines.
Does anyone have any questions on the summary that Sabrina just gave, or any of the individual budget pages?
So the next page is consolidated. So that is all BMPL for operational. The page after that would get into our capital expenses. And then the pages following this would be the breaking down if you had questions about specifically Ellie Shore or library versus museum and CHD, just breaking out those consolidateds.
My only comment is I find this a whole lot easier to read and understand because it's now a library-specific budget and headings. And so some of the strange holdovers with things being expended from one account but showing revenue in a different account, giving us weird percentages of over and under expenditures, this solves a lot of that. So I'm quite pleased to see the change here. Are there any questions or comments? Morris, I see your hand.
Yeah, just a fast question through you, Madam Chair. These figures have to go back to council again for, no, these are council approved. I'm sorry, it went over my head. So we have the money in the bank for this year, and we know, you know, how much you have coming for 2023. Good, that's great.
Yeah. So those not in the room, I trust you saw that Sabrina was vigorously nodding her head in response to Morris's question.
Yes, so looking at the cover page that was on there, the agreement that we have with council is that we will receive 6% of the tax levy of the previous year's council budget. So the 2021 amount of the tax levy was the 17 million and change, which dictated at the time that that agreement was made that this budget year we will receive the 1,043,000. In the MOU that we had with council on that piece, we did identify that there may be a need to come back for a one-time increase that would have to do with the salary study, because we were all working with numbers that we didn't quite know what was going to happen with the salary study. So the council budget approved that 160,486 that would be topped up, and the 1,043,000 had already been approved. So the council budget that actually was just passed last month has nothing to do now with this budget outside of that one-time top up. What it actually has approved for us is that in 2022, which is this year, they have a tax levy of 18.5 million. And the result is that next year we receive $1,110,000. So we didn't need to bring anything back to council. We actually now know what our budget is for next year. We don't need to wait for council's budget to go through next year, which I assume will be late, given that it would be a new council and they will probably start the budget process with the new council in place. We'll be able to move right forward come January 1 with a budget in place that we'll approve probably in September, October, November with our chair and the board here. If there's anything we had for additions that we wanted to move forward with, that would be something we would have to make a appeal to council, and then that would be in the budget. But those are one-off things that we would be looking at and not the overall budget. So yes, there's nothing else that we need to do with council, short of now give them the estimates so that they can develop the budget sheets for us so that we have our quarterly reports to come back to the board.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I suspect we need a motion to approve the budget. I'm looking at Sabrina to be sure. It doesn't appear. It doesn't appear on the agenda. So I will ask for a motion to approve. Jesse, is that what your hand up is up for? Yep. So Jesse is moving. May I have a seconder, please? I see Dorothy seconding. Any other discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair, why are we approving?
I can respond to that. Council has given us a pot of cash, so to speak. You, as the board, make the decision on where you wish that pot of cash to be divvied up across the lines. And then based on the approval of the 22 budget, it's my job to make sure we stay within it. So this is a mandate that you are providing to me to keep us in line and in budget according to the wishes of the board. And you will evaluate me accordingly.
I didn't want to say that, but yes.
So Morris is saying that he accepts what Sabrina has just said to all of us.
Ask a question.
So I will now call the question. All in favor of approving the 2022 budget?
There you go. It's my hand.
Great. Anybody opposed? I didn't see. Okay. That is carried. Thank you very much. So here's an item on the board planning meeting, which I kind of covered under my other report. So I don't have anything more to say on that topic. Wondered why it wasn't in the right order. So I think we're now on to any roundtable discussions. Is there anything anyone cares to report? I know we have a list of items here. Any comments, questions from anybody? Andrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just wanted to report that for the first time, English Country Dance has made use of the library facilities as Sunday afternoon in every other week for the next 6 weeks, I think it is. We met here for the first time. It worked for the numbers that we have. I think it's a great way of highlighting the fact that we are providing a good social cultural base in which groups from the community can come forward, and in this particular case, get some passive activity in with along with the culture base. So it was a great success. Oh, and it's open to anyone that wants to join. So
Being this St. Patrick's Day, I'm not sure.
Morris, if you want to speak, do you want to put your microphone on?
Seeing as it's St. Patrick's Day, I won't be joining your English country dancing.
Will you perform some Irish dancing for us?
I'll get my granddaughter to do it because that's what she does.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So I guess I need a motion to receive the information from the roundtable discussions. Mover, please. Somebody. Dorothy and Andrea, thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you.
Should be noted I'm wearing green today.
Yes, I know that.
Andrea just pointed out she's wearing green today. It's very important to put that in the minutes, I'm sure. Under key messages, I have written a couple of notes to myself, Sabrina, which means I probably didn't send them to you when I thought I was going to, that we might want to add to the key messages. There's, I think in your report, there's reference to the Ontario Parks Pass, which I think is a really brilliant approach. Does everyone understand what that is? It was in the report, but maybe Sabrina, you could just give a quick comment on what that is about.
Certainly. So we have a partnership with Ontario Parks. So you can come here and pick up a family pass, which allows you to go into any of the provincial parks for free. We also have some activity pieces, little backpacks for children to be able to use when they're there that talk about some safety tips. Now, what's the difference between heat stroke and sunstroke? Not that we need that right now. What's the difference between, giant's hogweed and some of the other things that might look, like a pretty plant, to sort of give some tips out in the world so that when people are walking, they know what to do. We're looking to add some additional pieces depending on where people are going. I know Mississauga rattlesnake have been seen quite regularly in some areas just in Bruce County. So that may be something that we're adding on what to do if you see somebody like that. They certainly can hurt you, but you can do a lot more damage to them than they do to us. So how do you properly back away and let them do their thing and move forward so that we're not disrupting any more wildlife than needed?
I also wondered about adding the Native Garden Initiative and the Readers Advisory Initiative and the changing COVID restrictions. I don't know that we need to see them written out now because they're in your report, but that would, those are the additions I thought we should have.
I'll add CHD on there too.
Oh, yes, the ceiling at the roof of the CHD. Yes, okay. Any other questions or comments or suggestion changes to the key messages? Morris, you? No, okay. So then in that case, may I ask for a motion, the board approve the release of the key messages for March?
As updated.
As updated.
So moved.
Morris moves that. Seconder? Jesse seconded that. All in favor? Great. Thank you very much. That is carried. So that takes us pretty much to the end of the agenda. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is April 21st at 2 p.m. There is no closed session. Just before we adjourn, I just want to ask how people felt about this hybrid approach. Yes, I would say it was a little rough getting started, and certainly I feel like my brain is split in two. I eventually realized that it was easier if I took the headphones off because I wasn't hearing voices in a delay. Yeah, about 2-second delay, which was driving me crazy.
I was continually muting the sound, so I wasn't hearing us back. Yes.
Yes. Anyway, so I think we should probably try to continue to do this to bring life back to normal, and hopefully we will, and I will be a little smoother at it next time.
I thought it worked very well. I thought it worked very well. Kudos, Lori. You did a great job chairing in that kind of hybrid environment. From this end, it was, aside from the bumpy couple first minutes, it was great. It was seamless.
Good. Thank you. Jesse, do you have any comments? You're the only other person that is in a remote situation for this meeting.
I thought it worked perfectly from where I'm sitting.
So the question I have, Madam Chair, is for May 19th. We're planning the full day for the planning meeting. How do we want to do that? Is that going to still be hybrid? If so, just that we're trying to think how to do that, because that's a bit different being planning than running through an agenda where it's going to be much more discussion. So I don't know the members who are currently not on site, if we're comfortable coming together, since it's not a board meeting, if we're comfortable booking out the gallery, having a lot of space to spread out, but being able to work in the same room for discussion.
I can ask Dorothy and Jesse if you care to comment, but we also have Gary and Joanne who aren't here, so maybe we need to talk about it in April. I'm seeing nodding heads.
Yeah, so you were saying, Sabrina, that in May 19th, it'll be, assuming it could be a hybrid, but we'd still be spread 6 or so feet apart, etc. And even if all of us were in the room, we'd still make it hybrid too. No?
No.
Oh, if all of the board members come, and you, of course, then it doesn't have to be this format. Then it's up to people who want to hear what we say to come and listen, actually.
As a planning meeting, we're usually closed.
Oh yeah, this is
so that's
planning,
under the act that we
Yeah,
would be
yeah,
closed for planning meetings like that. It isn't a business meeting or an approval meeting. It'll be working through a lot of aspects. We usually have a board meeting that follows at the end, and at that point, then yes, that would be open, that would be presented. But for the actual maybe 5 or 6 hours of thinking, working, trying to come up with the ideas of how we're moving pieces, and coming up with those more generation of ideas, that is going to be, I think, much more difficult in a hybrid format. Even if we were all online, it's difficult to do a working meeting with Zoom. It's much easier to do an agendaed one person at a time talk. It's possible, but we'll definitely have a lesser output.
So I'm hearing you say that it would be very difficult to do the May meeting if it weren't all in person, but we would be able to do it in the gallery spaced. But let's make sure we bring that up in April again, because as we know, with this particular situation we're in, things change rapidly, and we're talking about something 2 months away from now. Does that work for everybody?
That's good.
Good. Thank you. So I think that brings us to a close unless someone wants to stop me from adjourning the meeting. And I see nobody jumping in. So I will declare the meeting adjourned at 3:45.